Hi, everyone. Welcome to the book launch, the official book launch of A Blanket of Butterflies. And thank you so much for joining us. Sorry about our slight technical difficulties, but I think we're all under control. And I'm so happy to see so many of you here. My name's Kirsten Phillips, and I'm the Director of Marketing for HighWater Press. I've had the pleasure of working with Richard for several years. I won't say how many, and Scott and Donovan as well. Pleased to have them here with us tonight. We'll start shortly, but I'm going to start off with a land acknowledgement. The head offices of HighWater Press are located on Treaty 1 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I also have a bit of housekeeping to do before we start, so I'm going to read a little bit so I don't miss anything. I apologize. This book launch is being recorded, so your microphones will be turned off for the duration of the event. If you prefer not to have your image in the public video, you can turn your camera off as well. Also, throughout the evening, you can participate by entering your thoughts and questions in the chat. But please remember to be mindful of kindness and respect for everyone with your comments. And finally, there is a discount available tonight. The code will be provided for you in the chat, so take a look, and you can purchase HighWater at highwaterpress.com. That'll also be in the chat, so if you'd like to get a copy. Also, if you happen to be in Winnipeg, the Winnipeg Comic-Con is going on, and so you can come and see us there, as well as Donovan and Scott, so join us. Today, we are happy to have our host, Lauren McGinnis. He will be our moderator tonight. Lauren is the host of CBC North Morning Show, The Trailbreaker in Yellowknife. Before I turn it over to him, though, I have a special book trailer that introduces the book to you that I'd like to show first. So if we could roll that, and then Lauren is going to come on after that. Let's see if we have that available. I'm going to turn my camera off.
Right on. That's fantastic. My name's Lauren. Nice to meet you all, and a big thanks to Kirsten for the introduction. I'm sitting here in my garage with the book, A Blanket of Butterflies, Volume 1 in the Spirit of Denendeh series. So there's a couple of threads to pull out there. I'm in Yellowknife, and I'm really grateful to be with you tonight. If I head out that way behind my house, my next door neighbor and the neighboring building is the band office, the Yellowknife's Denendeh First Nation DELO band office. And so I recognize where I am too. Treaty 11 territory, Treaty 8 territory, just down the road from Treaty 11 territory, which is Cleachon communities and Cleachon countries, which Richard Van Camp is a Cleachon Denendeh writer. So we'll have some more to say about the panel that's going to join us, and we'll let them do the lion's share of the talking. I also want to say that, among the keepers of the land and the water here, the North Slave Métis Alliance are a big part of that, and original people of the land here. So I also want to let people know that 2 lucky audience members will have a chance to win some titles from HighWater Press a list of Richard Van Camp's favorites. He told me one is called Seven Generations, A Plains Cree Saga by David A. Robertson, Scott B. Henderson, who's on the panel tonight and part of this Blanket of Butterflies work. From the Roots Up by Tasha Spillett and Natasha Donovan. Another title, This Place, with contributors Scott B. Henderson, Richard Van Camp, Donovan Yaciuk, David A. Robertson. When We Were Alone, another David A. Robertson title, which was illustrated by Julie Flett, and A Blanket of Butterflies, Richard Van Camp, Scott B. Henderson, and Donovan Yaciuk. Like I said, I'm down in my garage. I'm kind of stuck here because there's a bit of COVID making its way through our family, and I'm stuck in the garage with a box of Halloween candy. So I've in the moments before this video went live, I had a couple of miniature coffee crisps. I have a few questions that we might use to get through the night, but we really hope that you have questions for the creative team behind this. And so figure out what they are and use the chat window to communicate those. We have Ryan Anderson is with HighWater Press and is helping us look after that. So find the HighWater Press window and submit your questions that way, and we'll chew on those as a group. Let's bring the panelists and the creative team behind A Blanket of Butterflies into this conversation. Richard Van Camp is the one I know the best, and I'm grateful to him for asking me to be a part of this evening's book launch of this beautiful book. Richard is, I mentioned Knicho Dene. He's also, I have him on the radio from time to time, and he's a wild stallion when you give him a microphone, very hard to control. And so I think what we'll do tonight is unleash him and the other partners in this and have a wonderful conversation. I have a special memory of Richard Van Camp that I'll share very quickly, and it was over at Chief Jimmy Bruno School in Edzo, which is Knicho country, a homeland for Richard and his family. And when I got there, I was in the library and I was looking at the spines of Richard Van Camp books and thinking about how connective and meaningful that is for kids there to know and to read his work. And then I went out in the hallway and Richard was telling a story to a group of kids. And he is the best storyteller I know, period. It was stories, it had the right amount of joy, sex, mischief, tension, rivalry, redemption, compassion, love. Like it was, anyway, I mentioned sex because like the edge had something to do with it. He could just hold this group of otherwise, distractible teenagers and just love it. And so my pleasure to bring Richard Van Camp into the conversation. And I have intros for Scott B. Henderson and Donovan Yaciuk, but I see Richard up on screen and maybe he wants to bring his friends into the conversation.
Sure, that sounds great. Well, Lauren,
Yeah.
I'm in awe, and I thank you for being our MC and for making time, and blessings and prayers to your family. I'm sorry to hear that COVID is in your house. So let's just all send our very best to you and your family, because this is every father's worst nightmare, is not only your kids, but Mama Bear fighting COVID. So our prayers are with you. And I genuinely mean this. I genuinely mean this. I'm so glad you have Halloween candy to help you. It's time. It's, if ever there's a time to have an emotional and just giver, you know what I mean? You're emotional eating. This is your night, baby. Kit Kat, Coffee Crisp, giver. And I'm really sorry that this has happened. This is no fair. But
let me just quickly say, because there's an audience, that we're doing great.
You're doing okay?
Seriously, all the good vibrations are welcome, and I feel them. But yeah, we're doing mighty fine. Thank you.
Bless you, buddy. Masi Cho. Can I just introduce myself? I'm taking Knicho 101. I'm the worst student in the whole wide world. I really, this is such a huge, important night for me, and I'm really grateful you're all joining us. It's lovely to see you all. I'm just going to say in Knicho Dene, Richard Van Camp CA, Si Hobatsa Gotso, Ate Honey Ho, Edmonton Nade. And what that means in Knicho Dene is, hello everybody, I'm Richard Van Camp. I was born and raised in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. Lovely to see my dear friend Sherry Haslam on the big screen tonight joining us. but I live in Edmonton, Alberta with my family, Treaty 6 country. It's a beautiful night here. And I'm really grateful to all of you because this is such a dream come true for me this evening. And I'm really proud to share this evening with you. So thank you, Lauren. And with us is master artist Scott B. Henderson. Scott and I have worked together before, and I was just saying in the green room that I really do feel that this is some of Scott's absolutely finest work. I'm in awe. I'm really proud to work with you, Scott, again, not only on book one, Blanket of Butterflies, but also in launching this series, The Spirit of Denendeh. And with us is, of course, Donovan Yaciuk. Donovan, I'm really grateful that you were able to join us, not just for A Blanket of Butterflies, to color it and bring it to a space we never could as writer and illustrator. You've really brought this to life in such a beautiful way. And I was saying in the green room that it's one thing to approve the arcs digitally and to go through the copy editing. It's another thing with when HighWater Press publishes you, they always sneak in these master touches. They didn't tell me about the French flaps, and they certainly didn't tell me that the color that they chose for everything would only be enhanced by the paper they chose. But Donovan, you really brought a beautiful spirit to our series, and I'm really proud to work with you. And I'm really grateful we have the next couple of years together to work together and really showcase each other's work, because this is certainly a joint effort, and I'm really grateful to all of you. So Masi Cho, thank you. And to HighWater Press, I want to thank our publisher, Catherine Gerbasi. I want to thank our editor for the series, Irene Valensis. Irene, I'm so grateful she lays the boots to me. We've just approved book 2. I've just sent in book 3 to Irene, and I have book 4 starting. It's circling me like a jackal, and it's a beautiful dance when you're being circled by a story. So again, I'm just really grateful for this evening. Masi Cho, thank you.
Okay, Masi Richard, Masi Cho. Scott B. Henderson, maybe we'll bring you into the conversation. It's a strong crew from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Treaty 1 country. Scott, are you there?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, we can hear you. Well, it's really nice to meet you, and it's beautiful to hear Richard's celebration of your work. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself in particular in relation to this project, A Blanket of Butterflies? But don't feel limited.
I'm not certain. I didn't plan this out. So, yeah, I live in Winnipeg. I was working with HighWater Press for about 3-4 years before the Blanket Butterflies finally came across their desk and then came to me. And it was a real joy to work on, because Richard was the first author I got to work with that wasn't David Robertson, who was awesome as well. But their writing styles are like night and day. So this script offered a lot of freedom on my part in terms of how to lay out the pages and panels and everything else. So that was it was really refreshing. It was just fun to do.
Thank you. Right on. And your work is beautiful. We'll keep chatting about that. Donovan Yaciuk, good evening. We'll see if we can bring Donovan up.
Oh, I'm glad I was muted there. I said good morning back, just to show you how much coffee I have not had today. So good evening. Hi, everybody.
Good evening. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your relationship to this project in particular? You know, Richard sort of set the table for you, talking about, I think what he sees as your contribution to bringing this to life, because the color part of this is, it's a huge step in the creation of a graphic novel, but it's also a huge step in the evolution of this story and how it's reaching people now.
Yeah, I mean, as a I've been a colorist for, I don't want to say, but if I do some quick math, maybe be generous to myself, I guess 25 years now. Yeah, wow.
Amazing
century.
resume
Yeah.
too. Like you've worked on your work has reached many people for the DC and Marvel universes. And
Yeah, I certainly, we were talking about A-listers in the green room. I'm certainly not an A-lister colorist to that world, but the number of people I've worked with and like characters that I've been able to color is just to go back and tell myself as a kid that I'd be doing this is I wouldn't believe it. And so and then as a colorist, I think some people, especially in the old days when color was really limited, it was just sort of looked almost like looked on as typesetting, maybe. It was just a technical thing to sell books. But now, digitally using Photoshop and whatnot, and changing black and white line art, you do get a chance to really participate in the storytelling in terms of mood, in terms of just enhancing certain objects that are inherent to the story and whatnot. I consider myself to be partially a storyteller, I suppose, and to be invited to take that craft up with someone like Richard, and then over underneath whatever position you want to take with Scott Henderson's artwork is it's a massive honor, and to be honest with you, let alone I have books I've worked on with Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and all these big characters that are in movies and whatnot, but these books are in massive bookstores. Like they probably have a bigger reach, I think, in terms of demographics and everything. And to think, I've been invited to be a part of that. It's very humbling. I'm just so happy to be a part of this.
Beautiful. Richard, I want to bring you back into the conversation. And I expect that, the people that have joined us for this launch, some may have a relationship with the story, A Blanket of Butterflies, but others may be coming to this as just fans of your work with a real interest. And so, Richard, in terms of this story, you set the table actually in this edition of it, or in this book we're launching tonight, with a letter you wrote a year ago, or a forward you wrote a year ago, October 2021. And you start with this series of what ifs. And I wonder if you would share the origin story in a way for you and this Blanket of Butterflies.
Sure. Well, again, so this is just fantastic. Thanks for giving me the mic. Okay, I got to make this quick because I got a lot of beautiful energy and I really want to honor everyone properly. So growing up in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, it was we had such a beautiful childhood with Dungeons and Dragons and Enter the Ninja and Bruce Lee, nunchucks, throwing stars made out of pop cans. It was just a great time, fast times at Ridgemont High. We had the movie channel, much music, night tracks. It was just, we had it made. We really did. I think we knew it. I don't think we ever admitted it, but I think we sensed that we were just so lucky to grow up with the same students and friends K through 12 in a small northern town. And one of my best friends in the whole wide world is James Crozier. And James Crozier was a security guard at the Northern Lights Museum in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. And when I was growing up, I loved to break dance and I wanted to be a ninja. And, I'm 51, it's not looking too good either way. But however, we've got the gift of imagination. So I'm really proud that we open. And I'm really proud that this entire series takes place in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. So we have a museum. It's called the Northern Lights Museum. I was just there a couple weekends ago, it was a couple weeks ago, actually. And my dear friend, James Crozier, who was security guard at the museum, kept saying that there was a full suit of samurai armor in the archives. And typical me, I was like, get out of here. Seriously, honestly, why would there be a full suit of samurai armor in our little community that's officially quadrilingual? Chippewa, Cree, French, and English are spoken at any given time. We're the Métis capital of the Northwest Territories. How on earth you wish a suit of samurai armor was in our museum? And he just maintained that it was there. That it was in boxes, 5 or 6 boxes. He's seen it himself, and he was a great dungeon master for our D&D campaigns but there was a side to him that could not be trusted. You think I can't be tamed? James Crozier cannot be tamed. Anyways, so years later, I was at the airport with the late and great Mr. Curry, who worked at the museum. He was one of the directors there. And I said, Mr. Curry, he's like, you know, you graduated 30 years ago, Richard. You can call me Ray. I'm like, no. You'll always be Mr. Curry. You'll always be Mr. Curry. Mr. Curry, remember when James Crozier was a security guard at the museum? And he goes, oh yeah, can't forget old James. I said, well, I don't know about what you're talking about, but I said, James mentioned that there was a real suit of samurai armor in our community, in the museum, in the archives, down in the in the closets there. And he goes, oh yeah, we've got a real suit of samurai armor in our community. And I went, and it just knocked my socks off. And I said, why? How? And he said, well, why don't you come down and see it? Well, we'll set up the boxes tomorrow. You can have a look. And I have pictures on my phone. He, took them all out. They showed them to me. We were back up in October. I got to see the suit of samurai armor is still there. And there are three theories. So when we're done, if you go CBC and you Google the CBC suit of samurai armor, Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, the three theories that were presented to me, my favorite, of course, was that, and what I have in the book, and what has since changed since the book has come out, the controversy that you're looking for, Lauren McGinnis, you shark, you piranha, you barracuda, I love you.
Thank you.
The hysteria that you're looking for is right here. And so there is a war memorial museum in Fort Smith, Arkansas, USA, a war memorial museum, and it is an academy devoted to the history of warfare. And there's a whole arm devoted to samurai armor and the swords and everything else under the sun related to the samurai. So I had a theory that some hungover summer student at Canada Post showed up on a Monday morning going, oh God, never again. I'll never dance with the captain again. Oh God, I'm dying. Where's those smelling salts? Looked at this battalion of boxes that housed the suit of samurai armor, and looked out of one eye and said, what does that even say? Fort Smith what? Fort Smith, that looks like an NT to me. Send them all to Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. Oh God, I'm dying. And that's how we inherited it. And that is the theory that I went with, because of the other two, mine was the most stimulating. And when I was back in Fort Smith last month, I met the new director, and I'm sorry, I did not get her name. I did not get their name. And I said, just simply, how do you think this happened? What's your theory? And she said, oh, it's easy. We had a pilot up in the Northwest Territories. He traveled the world, and he was in China. He bought the armor. He was a big collector. And when he passed, his next of kin didn't really have a safe place to house and store it, so they just gave it to our museum. And it was the way she said it. I believe her. So I've taken. You can teach an old dog rib new tricks, Lauren McGinnis. I'm recanting my really exciting, cool story of the hungover Canada Post student situation. I believe her. It makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Even though mine is way more exciting, the facts kind of add up. So I
think you've accepted that too easily. And as you continue presenting the origin story of the book, I think you should, I don't know, keep the doubt alive, keep the speculation. Anyway, it's a beautiful. So there's the sort of origin story of the samurai suit being in Fort Smith, and for decades that being, or for a long time, that kind of being a mystery that became a what if in your brain. And then I sort of see these other elements that are, you talked about the fourth story in this series is circling your brain, or kind of making its move. What were the other things circling your brain and making the move to turn a samurai suit at the museum in Smith into this elaborate, beautiful, the characters, all of it?
Well, thanks, Lauren. So I always say the two most powerful words we have as writers are what if. And, growing up in Fort Smith, I kept hearing these stories about uranium, raw uranium cake, uranium rocks being found in people's gardens, on the roads when they were doing the upkeep. And talking to a few of the mayors, there was genuine concern that we had uranium in Fort Smith. And so I started to just ask around, how on earth would raw uranium end up in Fort Smith? And I learned about the Canoil project when there was the race to build the atom bomb. And, the uranium that was used for the detonation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki came from the Congo, the United States, and Denendeh, the Northwest Territories. There were two mines, Ray Rock Mine and Port Radium, in which Dene men were used to go and extract the uranium cake and the uranium rocks under the supervision of the Canadian and American military. So Fort Fitzgerald became a transport route. It was called the Highway of the Atom. And we were a part of that. That was our inheritance as Fort Smithers, that we were a part of this race to build, the ultimate weapon that ultimately was used. So that was in the back of my mind. And then in 1991, the great and late George Blondin came to visit us at Arctic College. I was studying to be a land claims negotiator in a course called Native Management Studies. It was a 10-month course. And Mr. Blondin was supposed to just talk for, I think it was half an hour, to talk about his new book, Yamaraya. It might have been When the World Was New, but it was one of his new books. And he stayed for 3 hours. And we all received a PhD that afternoon with Mr. George Blondin. And he shared with us, the Dene laws, which are in the book. And he also shared with us medicine stories, but he also talked about Ea. And Ea, of course, was the prophet from Delaney, who, when he was a young boy, what he saw would always come true. But throughout Ea's life, and Ea passed in either 1940 or 1941, and George Blondin was at his funeral as a young man. Ea had one continuous nightmare. He was haunted by, almost like Nostradamus, by seeing this unholy nightmare. And Ea said, I have seen planes so powerful they never have to flap their wings. And I have seen men, Dene and white, going into our earth and digging up black eggs. And I've seen men take these black eggs and put them into the bellies of these birds. And I've seen two birds fly to where they follow the sun. And I've seen these two birds drop eggs that look I've seen these birds that never have to flap their wings drop black eggs from our earth on people who look just like us. And I have seen a fire so bright that it leaves only their shadows on what's left of their homes. We must never help the white people when they come north to take the black eggs out of our earth. And when Mr. Blondin was done with us, I remember knowing in a heartbeat that I was not going to give my life to politics. I was not going to be a land claims negotiator, that I was going to really honor what he was doing. And I wanted to record my elders and write stories and tell stories. And so that I wanted to braid that. So, as luck would have it, 20 years later, New West Press called and said, George Blondin is working on the last book he will ever publish while he's alive. It's called Trail of the Spirit, Mysteries of Medicine Power Revealed, and he wants you to be the editor. And I said, well, absolutely. And so I was the editor for the last book that Mr. Blondin ever published. And in all of Mr. Blondin's literature, he did touch on Ea. And it's interesting because Ea passed in either 1940 or 1941, and the detonation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened years later. So Ea never lived to see his worst nightmare come true. But we did not listen. The Dene people did not listen to one of their prophets who foresaw this hellish nightmare called Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the detonation. So to answer your question, how I work with stories is I usually braid 3 what ifs together. So it was the suit of samurai armor. And also we love to gamble in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. The card games, the, film, everything. People love to gamble. And I thought, well, wait a minute. What if a man from Japan had the repatriation papers to come to our community and take home his ancestors' armor for himself, for his family, for his honor? And but what happens if when he shows up, the katana that also was supposed to accompany this armor? And in real life, there is no, I wish there was a katana in real life in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. But up here, the katana was missing because the last director at the museum had a bit of a gambling problem and lost it to a very dangerous man named Benny the Bank. And so to answer your question, it was a series of what ifs. And it was just, what if a man from Japan came to Fort Smith? And what if a young Tlicho Dene boy named Sonny was at the museum every day because he was terrified of this suit of samurai armor. He was drawn to it. But what if on this particular day, Sonny is there when the man from Japan stands beside him with the repatriation papers, and the man from Japan has the same tattoo of the butterfly that's in the chest plate and in the helmet plate. And what if Sonny watches this man from Japan go to the museum director and learn that his ancestor's katana was lost in a poker game to a very dangerous man in town. And what if this little boy decides to help this man go get it? And that's really how it started. And luckily, we've assembled the dream team with my dream publisher, and the rest is history.
Yeah, there's a laugh in the book for me when the man from Japan arrives at the museum and wants to retrieve the suit and the katana, and he's dismayed that the sword's been gambled away. He said that that the sword was not that man's to give away or to lose. And the new guy at the museum's like, oh, believe me, that like I know. Anyway, so there's a sort of lightness to it. Are you open to telling us a little bit more about the characters in Fort Smith, because they have a life through your work, and obviously in your heart and in your mind and in Fort Smith?
Well, this was really a chance to once again work with Scott Henderson and illustrate the characters Torchy and Sven and the giant Flinch. So Benny the Bank is a very dangerous man, and he has adopted two boys, two very dangerous brothers, Torchy and Sven, and a giant named Flinch, and he's hand raised them to be really his hands. And they're very dangerous. They're based on two brothers that we grew up with in Fort Smith that I'm still terrified of to this day. And I'm really grateful that we got to work with Scott. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about how amazing Scott Henderson is and why we're all, Scott's busy for years. He's booked for years in advance. And I remember I was saying, Scott recently, I think a year ago, posted pictures. He'd been, I think, mountain biking, and he wiped out and he destroyed his hands. You could hear screaming all the way across Canada because, Katarina Vermette, David Robertson, myself, so many artists are relying on. And I said, remember when Mary Hart had her legs insured for $1 million each because they were so amazing, apparently? I said, Scott, you got to get those hands insured for $1 million each because there are mortgages are on the line, baby. Our babies may need fillings at some point. It's resting on you. But I do want to say one of my favorite all-time martial arts scenes is the original Old Boy fight scene in the train station. And you can Google this on YouTube. You can watch it later. And I remember when I submitted the script, I think I sent in 48 pages, and 6 of those pages I'd written out every possible martial arts scenario that I'd always wanted to do. I mean, there were cartwheels and backflips, and somebody ended with the splits, and I think there were a couple nunchucks in there, and somebody was taking somebody to Suplex City. I mean, it was on. It was a dogfight, but in human form. You know what I mean? I know you've been there a couple times, Lauren. Anyways, and I remember Scott sent me a note, and he's like, "Dude, we have 48 pages. We don't have a whole lot of real estate here. Look, I know what you're trying to do. I like Old Boy too. I got an idea, and I think we can do it in a splash page. Give me a couple of days." And then I think it was probably the next morning, because Scott, bless you, you work at night. Scott sent us this. So it was everything I had written in 6 pages, but he put in the background. And I think the beauty of Scott, besides his prowess and his skill, is he is really a master of efficiency, which makes it a dream. And actually, Scott, the reason I'm different from David is I trust you completely with how you want this dance to go. I can go page 1, panel 1. We open with a small boy. You're going to take it where it deserves to go. And it's always a joy to wake up. I love working with Scott because he works at night. Of course, I'm asleep. I go pre-verbal at about 8:30, asleep by 9:15. Very, very typical, boring, vanilla Virgo over here. Anyways, when I wake up in the morning to receive the thumbnails and then the inks and the pencils and the inks, and then now with Donovan, when I wake up and I see 8 new panels from either Scott or Donovan or both, it's just magic. It really is. We really have assembled the dream team. And I really do believe that, you know, if you're lucky enough, when you've got the story and you have the team, there's a certain amount of magic that elevates all your crafts together for a brief period of time. And it's gotta all line up, and it is lining up completely. And I'm just so humbled and honored to be included tonight with this panel. And I'm really excited to show you where the series is gonna go.
Okay, that's a thread to pull at. But first, Scott, could you show us could you just hold those $1 Million Lethal Weapon illustrating hands up? Oh yeah.
Oh baby.
You
Oh,
wouldn't
baby, that's-
know. You wouldn't
Yeah.
know. Scott, oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, it's really only my right hand. My left hand is useless, so it's really only one.
Getting weird, but anyway, thank you for that. Scott, I did want to ask you a question, if you don't mind to stay on the line here, but like there's a lot of, anyway, the depiction of the characters, because I am lucky enough to have spent lots of time in Fort Smith, and of course I live in the Northwest Territories, so I make my way around, and I'm not afraid of the brothers that Richard's talking about. I don't know them, but I can feel it in a way. What I guess what did you know about those guys, or what did you need to feel about those guys and the characters in there to kind of create what you created?
I'm trying to have to reach back my memory, because I think I worked on Magic Wolverines with you first, Richard, and then this, and then Mermaids, or with Mermaids first, then Like a Butterflies. I can't remember the order. I don't. I mean, I had what I needed in the script. They were bad men. I wanted. I mean, Torchy is this really tough bruiser type guy, so I was looking up pictures of like boxers and MMA fighters after their fights, and they got like the cauliflower ears and they're all beat up, and that's just part of their character. And so I started, I just sort of worked that in. I did another short story for Richard for Mermaids, translating one of his prose stories into a comic book, and it was however many hundreds of words that story was, but I only had 10 pages to do it in. So that was a fun challenge. And, but that one was very much focused on Torchy. And I feel like I developed that one first. I honestly can't remember. It was a very funny couple of years there, because so many projects were starting and being delayed, and starting, stopping, but then not being published for like years and stuff. So I just got to really know Torchy in particular, like not so much Sven, who wasn't in the stories quite as much that I had. Yeah.
You and I have a parallel experience, which is trying to keep Richard inside a container. For you, it's pages. For me, it's a broadcast with a hard out. Richard will sometimes say, if I say I say you're totally in control, but at 8 o'clock, this gets turned off. Anyway, thank you, Scott, and I'm sure glad that your hand survived that wipeout.
Yeah.
Your right hand especially, yeah. I want to remind people that we are wide open for a question and answer. If you have questions for the creative team, if you have questions about elements of the story or of the Denendeh laws, the first Denendeh law is share what you have, and they move on and continue to be powerful and interesting, and a window into culture and a good way to live your life, to be sure. So while we sort of open that up, please use the chat thread and message HighWater Press, which is our friend Ryan, who's on the back end organizing this whole thing, keeping it upright. Thanks, Ryan. Anyway, message your questions. We'd love to hear from you. Donovan, I wanted to not miss the chance to talk to you. One of the things I'm struck by about the color is the light, and the north.
Yeah, you noticed, eh?
The light is so special.
That means the world to me. Thank you for noticing that, honestly.
Well,
yeah.
way to go. Anyway, I'm glad to give you a chance to talk about it.
Yeah. In a former life, my photography, my Bachelor of Fine Arts is in photography, and a lot of that was landscape photos and just being out exploring the world with the camera, right? So during that actually a little slower than that, it was a 5-year experience for me to get that degree, but every day was just always looking with my eyes at light and how it was hitting things. So that really translates into my work. And when, not everyone picks up on that, and when they do, it just makes me so happy. And I also use it a lot. You'll see in some of the things, I think there's a scene I like in the kitchen, where everyone's at the breakfast table, and just using some of that light to try to separate planes. That's another big thing that I do. And Scott's, I'll touch more on Scott and Richard's, the balance between the two of them in a second. But Scott does do a really great job with his art in black and white, even of separating planes. There's something in front, something in the middle, and something behind, and there's distance, right? In a lot of his, even in a small kitchen, there's still the wall, you get a sense of that depth. And so using that light like that is really just trying to build off of what Scott's done and give it that mood, but also set back that, grandma's in the back of the room and the other two people are in front. But anyway, I just listening to how Richard works and Scott as a part of this, I think it's one of my favorite things about Richard's stories that I've now had a chance to experience. I mean, I've seen the proofs on the second installment of this story, right? They sort of do this awesome dance of passing that baton back and forth. There's parts of dialogue, and I mean, Richard's got the whole story plotted out, right? But there are parts where he does give that trust over to Scott. And there's panels, and in some cases, whole pages where there's no word balloons. But each one of those panels that Scott draws is just packed with so much information and emotion and story. And it makes my job easy. I don't have to figure out what the story is about here. I know exactly what I'm trying to communicate. It's a complete joy to watch how the story goes back and forth. You can hear Richard's, when I say voice, his creative voice, and then Scott takes over and just for those who haven't read the book, it's easy to breeze past the panels that don't have dialogue, but slow it down, take your time, because Scott's work is just a treasure. I mean, him and Richard are such a great pair and so much fun to work with.
Could not agree with you more, Donovan. Thank you for that. Awesome. And I wondered if there was a joke in it in a way when I was going through it again this morning, thinking, geez, there's pages in Richard's book here where he hasn't said anything. But anyway, that's obviously not the sort of creative, that's the outcome of a creative collaboration. And the story is on every page. And that comes from Richard, and it comes from Scott, and it comes from you, Donovan. So we have a question, and I'm grateful for that. If you have questions, please fire them off in the chat thread. A question from Nikki here for Richard. Do you ever get any feedback from people who recognize elements of the book based in real life, characters, places, etc.? Do you have anticipation or anxiety about that happening?
No, I don't, because I'm just so proud. I love Fort Smith so very much. It will always be in my heartland. My dear friend Leslie Ann Jones said, when you're from the north and you don't live there, you're kind of just homesick all the time. And I feel like whenever I miss home, I only have to open up these pages and to see the church, the Roman Catholic Church. I used to be an altar boy in that church, or to see the museum. I was just there last month. Again, with Donovan's lighting and Scott's artwork, I'm really proud that Northerners can see a real Northern community in a comic book series. I'm really proud that Northerners can see themselves illustrated, honored, and celebrated. That's I think what I was looking for when I was growing up. Growing up, I've been collecting comic books since I was 7, and I never got into the superhero stuff. I never believed it. I'm like Garth Ennis. Garth Ennis said that when he was a kid and he saw, the Fantastic Four or X-Men or Alpha Flight shooting each other with lasers and everyone was talking and nobody ever got hurt. He said he didn't believe it for a second, and I went, "Thank you for saying that." I always felt that way. But it was, titles like The Warlord by Mike Grell or Oink, Heaven's Butcher by John Mueller, a little bit of Swamp Thing. Walking Dead certainly really spoke to my heart. Robert Kirkman and his team. I was always interested in the human story, and I'm really really proud that this series, The Spirit of Denendeh, because tonight's launch isn't just about book one, A Blanket of Butterflies. It really is about a series that's really gonna, I think, showcase the complexities of issues happening in the Northwest Territories today in Denendeh. I'm really proud to show, how romantic we are, how thoughtful, how kind. At the same time, still living in the shadow of those residential schools. Benny the bank certainly has profited, made his millions off of the pain and anguish and sorrow off those residential schools, and that comes to light in books 2 and 3. I'm really excited for you to see Flinch. We've got a new character named Crow. The beautiful thing about graphic novels is it hit me in, I think, book 2. Gravity doesn't need to apply. It's such a simple thing to say, but with the graphic novel, gravity doesn't need to apply. And there's a character named Crow you're about to meet. I just can't wait. I'm just so excited for, and that's supposed to be coming out in April. I'm so excited for you to see where the series is going to go. I'm so grateful that there's going to be Dene and Inuit and Métis and Northern superheroes in here. And I love that in book 1, everyone's a hero. At sea is a hero. I love that it's a grandmother that stops escalating violence between soldiers, between warriors. I love that that Sunny is a hero. I love that they've walked into a mystery with the spirit. I love that in The Spirit of Denendeh, as a father, I'm always thinking, where is Zazie going to be able to go and see the Dene laws? And so that I snuck that in for Shinobu to wake up after a fight with Torchy, Sven, and Flinch, for them to see the Dene laws, for him to see it. I thought to myself, well, this would be great for teachers who have just moved up to the Northwest Territories and really have no idea about our Dene laws, and they're about kindness and generosity and thoughtfulness. I wanted to put that in there, and I'm really grateful that we've really honored the George Blondin story of Aya. I'm really proud that is in there too, and to see again the church, to see the community, makes me very proud. I really feel like I've honored Fort Smith in a really beautiful way, and I can't wait to show you more from our little town. And across the highway from Fort Smith, there's a little community called Border Town, and the second I heard that, I was like, ooh. Benny the Bank, of course, would live in Border Town, and of course he would have a sign that says "Dirty deeds done dirt cheap." Right? Of course he would, on his front lawn. It's like the Hells Angels in Campbell River. They have a gold. They used to have a gold doorknob made out of solid gold right there on Center Street, and they dared anyone to come and try and take that gold handle. That's Benny the Bank. I dare you to step on my lawn. And anyways, that's the kind of dynamics I love working with, where it's just laced with terror. I love it.
I love it. Richard, there's questions pouring in, including some real curiosity about where the series is going. So I want to get to that, but maybe that is closer to the end. There is a very specific question for Scott, and it's about whether you have a favorite panel or panels in the book.
Probably my favorite. Well, it's not a panel; it's the whole page. My probably favorite page is probably the one where the elder is telling Shinobu's telling a story about his samurai sword, and he's raising it up to the moon. There we go. Sorry, I was trying to find it. This one is probably it's a whole page, splash page, but it's probably my favorite. Although the story about the uranium and also the double page thread of Shinobu fighting Torchi and Sven is also
Yeah.
close. And they're not really a panel, it's like the whole page. It's not really panel ones, but those are probably my favorites.
Yeah, that's great. And
I
I
think
want to say to Donovan, the chat thread is going by quickly, but in the first splash page that you mentioned, Scott, is Shinobu Under the Moon, and I saw in the chat thread somebody really struck by the light on that page. The light of the moon stuck with someone who's paying attention to this and maybe has the book, or at least is seeing it on here. Richard, I have another question for you. And I just love it. Let me get to it here from Shay. I'm curious to know if Richard is going to write about the phenomenon of nicknames in Fort Smith. There just isn't any other place I know of, he writes, where everyone has a nickname.
You know, I was lucky in our new book, Gather, with the University of Regina Press. I try to document as many nicknames as possible. I'm never going to say no, but thank you, Shay. That's a lovely idea. I also want to say that, you know, another thing that was really important to me was when I was, that's from Sherry Haslam. When I was doing research on the book, I met a weapons master named Larry Lee in British Columbia, and he invited me and my dear friend Dusty into his house where he had a collection of small Japanese swords. And he actually took apart a katana in his living room. And he asked me, you know, what's the story that you're trying to tell? And I shared with him everything I shared with you. And I talked about the armor that was in our museum. And he said, you have to put this in your book. You have to do this. And I said, sure. He said, the greatest sword makers in the world wait until the August full moon to finish the holiest of blades. And I said, what? And he said, well, Japanese steel, of course, is heated and pounded and folded hundreds of times to make it stronger and sharper, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But the greatest sword makers in the world to this very day wait until the August full moon, because the August full moon turns a certain platinum that no other moon turns. So the greatest sword makers right now, Lauren, all over the world have already begun these blades, and they'll wait until the August full moon to heat the blade to the exact color of that August full moon before quenching it in the water for the very last time. He says, you put that in that book for all future blade makers. And we did. And I was really proud to honor Larry. I've tried calling him since. I don't know if what's going on, and I'm not. I hope he's still with us. He was an elder when I met him years ago. So being able to not only honor Aya and honor the Dene laws and certainly celebrate Fort Smith, but also to be able to put that in from a weapon master who really cared deeply about the craft of sword making. That's really special, you know, to use illustrated literature to honor not only the Northwest Territories, but also our shared legacy of pain, because the Northwest Territories is complicit in the detonation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I love that it's the grandmother that says to Shinobu, our people have met before in a dream. And she talks about Aya's prophecy. And so they're joined. And I love that this is about forgiveness. This is about repatriation. This is about a man trying to reclaim honor. It's about, you know, Han Solo is the ultimate reluctant hero in Star Wars. Benny the Bank is a hero as well. And we get to see Benny in books 2, 3, and 4, where he made a promise to a little girl, his granddaughter. And I don't want to give too much away. She asked him to turn his life around, and she asked him, how do you want to be remembered? And that's the message he wakes up with every morning now. And this series explores, you know, and I was sharing with you, Lauren, I always ask myself, what does it take to turn a wicked man's heart around? And this series explores that.
That's wonderful, Richard. We had a question from Annalise that was went to the heart of that sort of. How many books will there be in this series, and where is it going? And I think you handled that. I do also note time. I want to quickly mention that we have winners for the giveaways. that two people get that series of Richard's favorite books, including his own. But honestly, it's a long list of wonderful graphic novels and books with HighWater. So congratulations to Annalise and Robin. You did it. And so Ryan will be in touch with you and make arrangements to get you your winnings, your loot. That is it for the questions that have rolled in. And I think that's about the amount of time that we had intended to spend with you. I could keep chatting with Donovan, with Scott, with Richard, listening to Richard's stories. And so I just want to say a huge thank you to our three panelists, this creative team. What you've done here is so special. So all my respect and gratitude to you. I think on behalf of everybody who's in attendance here, and for the people that joined us, gee whiz, it's a book launch. I wonder how far the reach goes. I know we're all over Western Canada at least, and I bet beyond. So a huge thank you to you for attending this. Go out. If you're in Yellowknife, and I recognize a few names anyway, get over to the bookseller and get yourself a copy of A Blanket of Butterflies. But wherever you are, there's bookstores to support, and of course there's other ways to get your mitts on books. So a big thank you to everybody for participating in this. The last thing I wanted to say was that I got to speak with a leader and an elder today who is frustrated as all get out about his computer misbehaving. But he said, what he's trying to do these days is get his story, his life story, out into the form of a book, and his wisdom and his knowledge and his reflections and his adventures and his love. And he talked about the inspiration specifically that he might get from an event like this. And so that's pretty special. And it really, I think, grounds the kind of work you guys are doing and the kind of sharing you're doing. So Masicho for that, and a big thank you.
Masicho, Lauren. Masicho to everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, HighWater Press, and bless you, Donovan. Bless you, Scott, and Lauren. All the best to you and to your family. We're sending our very best prayers to all of you. Just take care of yourselves. And again, this has been a dream come true for me. We hold up our Halloween candy in solidarity to you, Lauren. If there's ever a night to fall off the wagon when it comes to the Halloween candy, there's
no wagon. I've never been on the wagon.
Well, we're rooting for you, and everybody who showed up tonight. Masicho, thank you very much. Bless you all. Bless your families. And this has been just wonderful. What a dream come true. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Cheers. Until we meet again. Cheers.